The history of West Plains, once a landscape of rolling hills and wilderness, reflects a narrative of transformation shaped by its early settlers and significant events and evolving infrastructure. From its origins of the Western Plains adjacent Thomasville to its establishment as a commercial hub following the arrival of the railroad, West Plains has undergone cycles of destruction and rebirth. Key landmarks, such as the historic post office and courthouse, embody the town's communal spirit and its ability to preserve the history amid change. This documentary will explore how the legacy of its founders, the impacts of tragic events, and the contributions of organizations like the Freemasons have forged a unique historic identity for West Plains. Originally, West Plains was an area full of rolling hills and wilderness. The name West Plains was given to the town based on the nearby township of Thomasville. Residents referred to the barren land as the Western Plains, a planed area west of Thomasville. The name stuck and eventually would become the town's official title. Galloway Park is the only area where the town's native fauna and wildlife can still be observed. In 1832, Josiah Howell created the first settlement in the region, and the county was named Howell after him in 1858. In 1839, a hunter known only as Adams became the first settler, setting up his homestead around the spring that would become the water supply for the entire town. The first structures for the town were built around the spring. However, a government building was erected atop of it. The historic post office became the center for communication and trade, sitting on top of the spring in the middle of town. In 1931, the old post office was dedicated as a historic landmark, and a ceremony was held with hundreds in attendance. The building was converted to a library between 1966 until the new West Plains Public Library was completed in 1998. The building still remains, though less as a functional post office now, and more as a historic site reserved for ceremonies and historic events. The building is generally used for parties, proms, and weddings now. While the post office now functions as an event center, you can still find memorabilia to the building's history all throughout. Here are photographs showing historic events that happened throughout the town's history that involved the post office. Here is a newspaper article that details the dance hall explosion and the victims who were lost during it. Around it are historic figures, events, and timelines in the town's history. Here you can see the early railroad and pictures of people building the tracks. Here's what the town would have looked like back when it would have mostly been wagons and old buildings. Here's a picture of the destruction that occurred after the dance hall fire. And many more images commemorating the town's history and its founders. Most of the original items that would have been in the post office serve little more than aesthetic appeal now. But you can see here where they would have slotted letters and other kinds of storage for the post office back when it was still in use. Within the post office are vaults that once used as storage for the town's finances until the bank was built. The other vault in the post office would have also doubled as storage for the town's finances and for the bank. While you can still see the original doors in place, and that it would work great for money storage, it has a bit of a different usage now. As the downtown area came into being, a courthouse became a necessity to conduct law and order within the area in 1859. The courthouse dually functioned as a stronghold for soldiers during the Civil War. The wooden structure had been rebuilt in 1862 after the battle had destroyed much of the original structure. The battle between the Union and Confederate soldiers resulted in the town being burned down and later rebuilt. Monuments erected after the battle can still be seen outside the courthouse today. Located in downtown West Plains, the historic Farmers and Merchant Bank building was established in 1911. This was the first bank in Howell County, and it still functions as a vault for the West Plains Bank and Trust Company. The building itself was built by the Freemasons. Their lodge can still be found 4 buildings down that way. If you look closely at the stonework, you can still see the chisel marks where they handmade it themselves. Much of the town had to be rebuilt from flames once again when the Bond Dance Hall exploded and burned on Friday, April 13, 1928. The explosion was caused by a fire that started in the Weiser Motor Co. garage, which was located below the dance hall. 39 people were killed in the incident, and 23 were injured. Another 3 buildings were completely destroyed along with the dance hall itself. While much of the destruction was later repaired, the burns left along surrounding buildings are still visible to this day. The song "The West Plains Explosion" was written by Vermon Dalhart and Carson Robinson in 1928 in memoriam of the tragedy. The original cause of the explosion is still speculated, though the most likely cause would be the gasoline that had been stored in the garage below. How it would have caught fire, however, is still unknown. Like many of the buildings in the downtown area, these were some of the first ones that were built into the town. You can see here 3 layers of where this building would have been rebuilt over time. These bottom 2 layers almost look similar, but if you look at the lower part here, you can see a large difference in the stonework from here to here, where these stones were definitely hand chiseled. You can see from the difference in the actual cuts in the stonework versus the upper layer. So this would have been another second layer that would have been built onto the building. And then a third layer can be seen up here. And while the building that was originally here has been torn down, you can also see a 4th layer start to come up over there, where they would have actually outlined the original stonework with another layer of bricks. The majority of the downtown area in West Plains was built by Freemasons. In the typical fashion of their architects, the original cornerstones were marked by their builders. Due to fires that destroyed the town during the Civil War and the later destruction by the dance hall fire, many of these buildings had to be repaired and rebuilt. As such, some of the original cornerstones have been buried or replaced by plaques. These photos do show what I could obtain of the original cornerstones, as well as one from the Freemason temple in the town as an example of what they would have originally looked like. The town and its structures have been continuously rebuilt, the water sources that once brought life to the area filled in, and much of the nature stripped. But through it all, remnants can still be found, telling the story of how this town was built, and the heart of its residents still remains in their descendants that now live in the town and preserve its history.